Welcome to the TOEFL Listening section. In this section, you will listen to an academic lecture and then answer questions about what you heard. You may take notes while you listen. You will have time to review your notes before answering the questions. Listen to part of a lecture in a university class. You will hear the lecture only once, so listen carefully. After the lecture, you will answer some questions about what you heard. Some questions ask about the main ideas and supporting details. Other questions ask you to make inferences or connections between ideas. Answer each question based on what is stated or implied in the lecture.
Good morning, everyone. Today we will examine coral reef ecosystems. We will focus on their biodiversity, the ecological functions they perform, and the primary threats they face. Coral reefs are often called the rainforests of the sea. They cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, yet they support an extraordinary proportion of marine species. In some regions, reef biodiversity rivals tropical forests. At the core of reef productivity is the symbiosis between reef-building corals and microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. These algae live inside coral tissues and provide photosynthetic products that fuel coral growth. In exchange, corals supply nutrients and a safe habitat. This symbiosis drives calcification, which builds reef structure. Calcification is the process by which corals precipitate calcium carbonate. The three-dimensional complexity of reef framework creates microhabitats, which increases species richness and supports fisheries and coastal protection. A useful case study is the Coral Triangle in Southeast Asia. This area contains the highest coral species diversity on Earth. It sustains artisanal fisheries and livelihoods for millions of people. Protecting this diversity has global importance for food security and cultural heritage. Despite their importance, reefs face multiple interacting threats. The most immediate and well-documented is thermal stress from rising sea surface temperatures. When water becomes too warm, corals expel their zooxanthellae in a process known as bleaching. If stressful conditions persist, corals die. For example, the Great Barrier Reef experienced severe bleaching events in recent decades. Large-scale mortality reduced reef complexity and undermined associated fisheries. Recovery is possible, but only if stressors are reduced and reef connectivity allows recolonization. Ocean acidification is another global threat. As carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater, carbonate ion availability declines. This reduces calcification rates and weakens reef framework. Combined with warming, acidification can shift reefs from net accretion to net erosion. Local stressors often interact with global change to exacerbate decline. Nutrient runoff from agriculture and untreated sewage promotes algal blooms. Overfishing removes key herbivores such as parrotfish and surgeonfish, which normally graze algae. Without herbivores, algae can overgrow corals and create a persistent algal-dominated state. Successful management requires a combination of global and local actions. Marine protected areas can protect key habitats and maintain herbivore populations. Watershed management can reduce nutrient input and sedimentation. Yet protected areas alone cannot stop warming or acidification. There are also active restoration techniques. Coral gardening uses fragments grown in nurseries to transplant onto degraded reefs. Assisted evolution approaches aim to select or breed corals with greater thermal tolerance. These interventions are promising, but they are not a substitute for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Another important concept is functional redundancy. Reefs with multiple species performing similar ecological roles are more resilient to species loss. For example, several species of herbivores may control algal growth. If one species declines, others can partially compensate. Finally, reefs provide ecosystem services that are easily quantified. They support fisheries, generate tourism revenue, and buffer coastlines from storm surge. Valuation studies show that protecting reef services often yields economic returns that exceed the cost of conservation. In summary, coral reef ecosystems are biodiversity hotspots that depend on coral-algal symbiosis and calcification to build complex habitat. They face interacting threats from warming, acidification, pollution, and overfishing. A mix of mitigation, local management, and targeted restoration is required to preserve reef functions and services.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then, answer the question.
When water becomes too warm, corals expel their zooxanthellae in a process known as bleaching.
This concludes the listening section. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit Spinta.org.